I didn't have a career laid out in front of me. I hadn't gone to law school, and I went to living on my brother's floor in his apartment while he was at McGill doing his degree.
And then you went back, and it's like some things about how you carry yourself. It brought me back to, and this is going to go way back, to our speech class in Loyola. With Dr.
Khoury.
Bounce, project your voice, bounce it off the wall like ping pong balls.
Oh my God, I think about that class all the time. 24th of March, 2021. And it says, look at the top line. You can't read my writing. It says, so what now? In that moment, it's like, this is like, I'm out of a job. What do I have to do?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Making Your Mark podcast. I am your host, Mark Bundang, and today I have a very special guest. His name is Mike Wodzicki. Hey, Mike.
Mark.
How are you, my friend?
It's a beautiful Sunday in early November here in Ottawa. How are you?
It's a cold November in Montreal, which is why I have my sweater. But we are Canadian, right? So
yeah, we look forward to this. Yeah.
Perfect. So a little bit about how I know Mr. Wodzicki. Mike and I actually graduated from the same class, 1994. From Loyola High School here in Montreal. One of the things that attracted me to his profile and to kind of reconnect with Mike during, I guess, how long has it been? It's been, 20-something years since?
31 years.
31. Oh, my God.
You aged us by saying that we graduated together in 94, and now I just confirmed what generation we are and what age we are.
Thanks, everyone. We're done. Thank you. Oh, man. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? 31 years, and I'm happy to see that you look happy, healthy, and well, Mike. One of the things that I guess I was trying to get to is that there's a motto that we have, at least when we were coming up in Loyola. It's called "Men for Others," right? And that value, I knew that you had it back in 1994, and I'm pretty sure after having read your profile and caught up with some of the stuff that you've done over your career, Mike, that still holds very much true in your heart. So with that common value, I really wanted to reconnect with you and kind of see what kind of story you have. And maybe there's a lot there. There probably is a lot there for other people to kind of learn from and kind of take with them and apply if they need to. So if you can, Mike, would you please tell the audience a little bit about your background and where you feel you made your mark?
I think how you make your mark, it really goes back to what you started with the motto of Loyola High School. And when we were there, it was an all-boys school, and now it's co-ed, which is great. And it was a Jesuit high school, a Catholic high school, and the motto was "Men for Others." And what that means, it's, yes, necessarily you're putting others before yourself, always. But it's not so much that you're putting them before yourself, but it really comes down to how you interact with others, how you treat them, and how you make an effort to always be thinking ahead, to leaning in and saying, right, how is it that what I'm doing with you individually is making a difference? Because if you start doing that in the first instance, well, then that kind of translates into how you're doing it in an office, how you're doing it in an organization, and how, well, now I have a small consulting business I launched a few years ago with a partner. And that's really the most important part of it. It's all about the how. And then it's about the who you're trying to do that with, but it's really all about the how. And so to your question about how you felt you've made your mark, well, hopefully somewhere along the way, it's in how throughout my career, it's how you interact with others. And whether that was when I worked in politics, whether that was when I worked abroad, whether that was when I worked in in the human rights sector, in the cooperative sector, in the municipal sector, and now as a consultant. That how is something that it's not entirely clear at the beginning. Well, my first job was delivering newspapers when they still existed, but working in the service industry, working as a waiter for several years, like you start learning early on, but you don't know it. It is about the how. How do you treat the clients who walk through the door? And it's amazing how now, all these years later, I can go back and think about those types of lessons I learned waiting tables at a great little Polish restaurant that's still there in the old port of Montreal.
Hmm. So that theme of service to others, you kind of alluded to it a little bit as well in your little background recap. I wanted to ask you. I mean, after you come from university, right, this is kind of where your journey begins. A little bit less than 31 years. That's what you said in terms of your career. Can you take us back a little bit about like what was it like? Just after you left your bachelor's.
So I after Loyola, I mean, for those of you who aren't from Quebec, we have this waiting period, this limbo period between high school and university called Cégep. And so for the longest time, I thought I was going to go into the sciences. And Cégep, it's meant to give you a little bit of a testing ground before you commit in university. And so I knew it's amazing how over the course of your career, what you learn going through it is not so much, you're always told you got to know what you want to do. In my experience, it's more you learn what you don't want to do at the outset. You kind of, I don't want to do this. You have an experience, you study something, I actually don't want to pursue that. And so in Cégep, I studied the sciences, and I was like, I don't want to continue with this. There's just too much rote learning and memorization. So I went to McGill. I did an undergrad in poli-sci, and there's like this, you feel sometimes when you're doing an arts degree that you're being led towards law school necessarily. But I knew that after I had seen friends who had done pre-law or who were in law already, that I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel like law was where I wanted to go and spend the next 3 or 4 years of my life. And I felt like I hadn't had a university experience yet that was one that we see in TV shows or see on movies, no matter how wonderful it was at McGill and how much I appreciate McGill. I took a flyer and I applied to schools in the UK, and I was accepted at 2 schools, and I went to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland to do a master's degree in social and political studies, but really focused on this idea of nationalism, because that was part of my background. I mean, I'm the first one of my family born in North America. Both of my parents are refugees of World War II in different places, right? Of Polish extraction, but still, I was the first one born in North America. And I grew up as an Anglophone in Quebec. There had been the referendum in 95, which we were all part of, and so this idea of, for Quebec to become a sovereign country, essentially. And so there was this idea in my head I needed, and me with this I'm a Montrealer, I'm a Quebecer, I'm a Canadian, I'm Polish, I have origins in other places. So this idea that I could go to Scotland, to Edinburgh, a phenomenal city, and spend a year studying this was something that my mom thought was wonderful, and my mom helped me out. And off I went to Scotland for a year. And so I studied there for a year, an incredible experience. And then I came back to Canada after that. And I had a master's degree. I didn't have a career laid out in front of me. I hadn't gone to law school, and so I didn't have like this feeder system, which I would have had to compete for into some law firm. And I went to living on my brother's floor in his apartment, not too far from where we grew up, while he was at McGill doing his degree. And I was waiting tables again at the same restaurant that I cited earlier, while I was trying to figure out, okay, what happens next? And where does it go next?
You kind of didn't have a lot of the path carved out, right? Like you didn't know what was ahead of you. You had a first job, right? Like what was that?
Well, I did get a first job, and again, this comes back. I mentioned earlier that you're waiting tables, and it's how you treat people, and so I'm working at the same restaurant. I've come back. I'm doing a couple shifts a week. I'm living on my brother's floor. Um, and I'm applying for jobs, right? And there's jobs. This is the late 90s, early 2000s. Like there's jobs in the marketplace. So like it wasn't completely empty. And so, but like random jobs, like you're going to go sales for a trucking company. You're going to like random in the sense that it's something I would have never thought myself doing, but hey, I need a job, or so I'm just going to start applying places. And there was one day at that Polish restaurant, and the Polish community is quite, broadly speaking, you understand many people as relatives. Whether they're first degree or sixth degree, it doesn't matter. They're relatives. And so there was a table one night in that restaurant that was full of Polish, older Polish women, like generally the age of my mom, let's say. And one or two of them were aunts. I don't know how, but they were aunts. And we were talking, and I speak a little bit of Polish, enough Polish to get by. And one of them was like, "Hey, you know what? I work in Ottawa. Do you want to come to Ottawa like next week? Just come to Ottawa next week, and I'll set up some conversations for you in Ottawa." And I was like, I hadn't been to Ottawa since I was in grade 6, and we went on a bus tour before we finished elementary school. And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll go to Ottawa." The Polish telephone makes some phone calls, and I get a place to stay in a spare bedroom of another aunt, another relative, who I knew a little bit better than this first one. And they got on the horn, and this is the way the world works, actually. They got on the horn. Now we're showing that it was 31 years ago that we graduated. They started calling around, and they set up, like over 2 or 3 days, I had conversations with different people that were part of a Polish network of sorts. Like they were just random Polish people who kind of all worked in different positions. And so I had conversations that at different departments of which I knew nothing about. Like despite having studied political science, I'd studied it. Like my focus hadn't been in politics or on the Canadian parliamentary system or anything like that. But I was just having conversations with people, and they weren't all going well. I remember I had one conversation at the Department of Justice. I had a suit. I was presentable, I guess. And the only feedback I got after that informal information interview was he took no notes. He had no notebook. And I'm like, oh, crap. I'm really not ready for this. But one of the conversations I had was with a woman, Danuta, and she worked at Foreign Affairs, which was then the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, right? And she knew the chief of staff of a minister, a junior minister. The way the cabinet works and all that, it's evolved over time, but at the time they were like junior foreign ministers, basically. And the woman was the chief of staff of this junior foreign minister, and this lady Danuta had a very good relationship with this chief of staff. And she said, "You're going to go and meet her." And so I did. I went to meet this woman at the East Block of Parliament on Parliament Hill. And I didn't even know that an election was coming, and there was one coming. A federal election had just been called, or was about to be called, by Jean Chrétien. This would have been in 2000, the fall of 2000. Or they had just gone into an election campaign. He had called the election early because he thought he could get a majority. And the chief of staff was like, "Listen, I have nobody here in my office. Everyone for this junior minister is in Edmonton. They're in the riding. The political staff is there. They've taken a leave of absence so they can support his campaign." Like no one thought he was going to win because he was a Liberal cabinet minister from Alberta. And she's like, "I need someone to answer phones and file mail and, write emails, to respond. I can't pay you anything. Can you do it?" And I was like, "Sure. Why the hell not?" And so I got a volunteer gig for a junior minister in the Chrétien government in the fall of 2000, starting just a month, November to December. So I started going to East Block, and that was at a time when Parliament was way more accessible. Like there was not a lot of there was security, but all you needed was an ID card, and they'd let you in, and there was no big deal. And that's what I did. I went in every day. I met people. I was applying for other jobs. Like I was looking for work elsewhere and getting interviews. But that's what I was doing. And then he actually won that election, remarkably. like by several hundred votes. And I say remarkably because no one expected him to, but in retrospect, he was one of the best. And when he left politics, one of the longest serving MPs of his era. And one of his advisors, one of his staffers left. She moved back to where she was. I think she was from South Africa originally, and she moved back to South Africa. Okay, someone's leaving, doesn't matter. It's just random. And the chief of staff calls me into our office one day and goes, you haven't applied for that job in this office. I'm like, well, of course not. Like, I'm qualified. Like, what the hell? I've been here like 4 weeks or 3 weeks. And she goes, you should apply. And I was like, okay. And I did apply. The next day or 2 days later, I had an interview with the minister and I was hired on the spot. So all of a sudden I went from waiting tables in Montreal to, and again, it comes to the how, is how are you interacting? And it's not that I was doing it on purpose. It's not that I had this plan and it was Machiavellian. I didn't know. And something that person, Cynthia Gibor, and she's passed, that chief of staff had faith in me. That minister listened to what Cynthia would tell him to do, I think. And I went from that to all of a sudden becoming an advisor for a cabinet minister in the Chrétien government. And I did that for 3 years, from December of 2000 to December of 2003, when he was removed from cabinet. And so that was a training ground for so much in my life. And I have no idea, like, how I was blessed to get a job like that when I had no background in politics. I hadn't come up through the party system or anything like that. I didn't work on campaigns. I didn't do any of this stuff. But I started doing that for that minister. And many of those relationships that I developed then, friendships, are ones that even now, more than 25 years later, are people I'm still in touch with, who are all over the place in their careers, in politics and otherwise, which is incredible. But again, it comes back to the how, and how that's one of the things that, like, how do you make your mark? It's like, how are you interacting with people? And that's not something that I knew then, but it's something that I clearly is really part of what I am now.
Well, what do you think? I forgot her name. You mentioned, what is it, Edith, was it? Or
Cynthia, the EA?
Cynthia.
Yeah.
The one who encouraged you to apply, right?
Yeah.
What did she see in you? What do you think?
It's amazing how, okay, first of all, there's a degree of competence people have to have, I think. Like, you have to, like, simple things that we go back to Loyola, but like, be on time, be respectful, write well. When someone asks you to do something and you say you're going to do it, do it. You know, simple things like that. Like, just be, and be open to doing new things they ask you. They're like, would you like to write a speech on this? Or can you respond to this letter? Like, things I had never done before. Can you do it? Number one, do that, but then do it in a way that is, like, cross the T's, dot the I's, you know, pay attention to what you're working on. But that's like the basic. Do that stuff. Like, if I had shown up in the office every day in dirty clothes, or like not on time, and I don't know, like things like that you don't make your mark when you do that, number one. But number two, and this comes back to the how again, try and be positive. Like, if you can, and it's really hard because we all go through shit in our lives, and some of the shit is heavy. Like, and I know this, you know this, everyone who's listening knows this. We've lived it, and we can all talk about different things that we've had. But if you're able to do that first piece, you're able to, like, reach a certain stand or a certain level, but then to be positive and bring positive energy and to be open to helping and to, you know, I mean, just look at me. I mean, I didn't know this then. I certainly know it now. I also have all these privileges just because of who I am and what I look like, and like that's clear. But then it's even more important it's the how you are. And it's how you're, and I think hopefully what Cynthia saw was, she saw someone, I think, who could be adaptable, because working in that kind of job for a politician is really hard, because there's so much different stuff being thrown at you. Politicians, not all of them, but by and large, they're very unpredictable. because they do have so much stuff on them and so many pressures coming at them from different places, especially if they're cabinet ministers. So you have to be able to roll with the punches. You have to be able to deal with a lot of grief from officials who are working for the minister. You might be getting grief from voters. You might be getting grief from other political offices who don't like something that you're doing. And so you're getting grief all day. And somehow you have to be able to handle it. And Cynthia, hopefully, she was a wonderful woman. And like I said, she passed several years ago. But she saw something, and she gave me an incredible opportunity that kind of formed, like informs the rest of what I'm doing, even if that's now more than 20 years ago.
And the minister, who was the minister that?
His name was David Kilgore, and a remarkable man, a man of deep faith. And this is not going to be a surprise to anyone who's ever engaged with him. Like he and like any politician, you have people who are huge fans of his and people who can't stand him. But for a guy who would get elected for 26 years, running under two different party banners, in a riding that was incredibly diverse, right? He had to work his butt off. He was a real MP. And I think it's one of the reasons Mr. Chrétien had a lot of time for David, was because he could keep winning elections. He would go back and nevertheless win elections in that riding, which is really, really hard to do. And so he was a junior foreign minister, basically a secretary of state for 7 or 8 years. He gave me an incredible opportunity to work with him. It wasn't always easy, but because of that experience that I had, whether I knew it or not, it's been informing the rest of what I've done for the rest of my life.
And what's the I guess the biggest takeaway you have with the experience you had with him?
Well, I knew I didn't want to work in politics. I knew I didn't. It's not to say that I didn't like politics. It's not to say I didn't like the idea of considering being elected or anything like that at any order of government, whether municipal or provincial or federal. And it's not to say I didn't have a deep appreciation and value of the public service that politics is. But I knew I didn't want to work in politics. I didn't want to be a political staffer. So that's not a positive thing to take away from it. But the positive things come later. I knew I didn't want to go into politics, and I knew that I wanted to work abroad. I thought I needed, and the thing is about working in politics is that it's the type of experience where while you're doing it, you have no idea if anyone else will value what you're doing, will understand the learnings and what you're able to do in terms of multitasking, engaging with people, like understanding like systems and how they're working. If you're good at politics. Understanding people's intentions and how to push their buttons and all of that stuff, but you don't know how to market that. And so one of the things I knew is that I didn't want to keep doing it. I didn't want to find myself. I didn't want to continue in the Martin government, and I knew I wanted to go abroad. And so I was looking at different opportunities and to get abroad, and I did land one that sent me to Serbia in June of 2004. Where I initially was going to go there, and it wasn't clear. It was one of these, it's a program that doesn't exist anymore, but it was an opportunity to go and basically work as part of the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe mission in Belgrade. They were 5 years removed from the war with NATO, and it was a democratization program on how to open parliament, right? And I showed up there, and again, this is just, sometimes the universe does things and you just step in and you make the most of it. The person who was managing a program that was funded, I think, by the Dutch government to engage with not only the Parliament of Serbia, which at that point was one of two states in a federation of Serbia and Montenegro. So they had a national parliament, but then also the federal parliament. It no longer exists. Serbia is now an independent country, it's its own country, and so is Montenegro. But this person managing that program left, and the people there were like, you should just manage this. So I went from showing up there to supporting this program to managing it, having 2 local employees, and staying there for 6 or 7 months, having an incredible experience, living and working in Belgrade, and thinking again, okay, where does this lead me to? And I thought I was going to stay abroad. And I eventually, it was transitioned into an offer. Again, it's about what you don't do, not always, and about what you do. So I had an offer so I didn't go to law school. I made a conscious decision not to. I followed my intuition, luck to go into politics. I knew I didn't want to stay in politics. I landed in Serbia. I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought I was going to stay. I got an offer for a 2-year full-time position in Kosovo, but by then I had been offered another full-time job, but in Montreal, to come home. And at the time, I was seeing someone. I started seeing this person when I was still working in politics, and I had a job offer to go to this organization in Montreal. And despite thinking that I would spend a career abroad or spend like the next foreseeable future abroad, I had this opportunity I never thought would happen in Montreal. I had this person who lived in Montreal and we were living apart from each other. Spoiler alert, this person is now my wife and the mother of our 3 wonderful children. And so that worked out pretty well. And so I spent 7 or 8 incredible months in Serbia, made some incredible friends there too, even to this day, who we're still close. And I ended up in Montreal for the 2005 to 2010, in a federal agency that worked on, it no longer exists, on human rights and democratic development. And that was another incredible learning experience, something completely new that I'd never done before.
I want to touch upon something because it's not job specific or in one of the jobs you've mentioned, but it's just the way you've been going from this one to that one to this one to that one. Okay. So for a lot of us out there, a straight line is usually what makes us feel safe, in our career trajectory, right? So climbing a corporate ladder, go title after title after title, but for you, that doesn't seem like it was important. Why are you the way you are? In terms of going, like, it sounds like you were at ease, just letting life show you the path to take, as opposed to you kind of like, I'm writing this. This is going to be my next phase. This is going to be my next phase. Why are you the way that you are?
I don't know. I don't think you're giving me way too much credit, Mark, because it's not me who's the way it is. I think sometimes, okay, why am I the way I am? I have privileges. I have people see me and treat me and interact with me in a certain way just based on what I look like. I know that for sure. Like that's science. It's not me giving an opinion. This is like it, and so you have to, or I have to, like, it's something that I'm very conscious of, and it's something that I don't bear lightly, if that makes sense, or easily for that matter. And so I don't think it's because I'm that way as much as the things sometimes happen for things that I can't control, but they happen. Sometimes I get into places where people make decisions regarding roles I can play that I don't anticipate. There's a part of it maybe that's faith, not faith in the religious sense, but because although maybe that's in there somewhere, all of us or some of us are more lapsed Catholics than others, I guess, or lapsed whatever, insert religion here, and you're lapsed, right? More or less. But I can't tell you, Mark, why, but it's just a belief that Serbia felt right. Okay, politics felt right, made it work for 3 years. Serbia felt right. It was leading to good things, but then an opportunity in Montreal comes up, which I didn't think I was going to get. I was not the typical profile of someone who had that kind of job before, but at that moment in time, in that organization, they were looking for someone who didn't have a typical profile. I got lucky. But then you make the most of it. Like, you're there, so you get lucky, and for whatever reason, someone has seen something in you, and okay, so now how do you make the most of it? And that comes not being Machiavellian, not like I'm going to change the world, but it comes down to how do you interact with individuals who you're working with on your team or not, people who are working in all different parts of the organization, whether it's the CEO or a receptionist or in finance or in human resources or a peer, or it doesn't matter. It all comes down to how you're interacting with them, while at the same time doing so in a way where they know that you'll do what you say you'll do, and you'll do it well. There's a certain level of expectation and competence when you work in any kind of organization. And if an organization doesn't value that and doesn't value how you're acting, here's a lesson learned. And now I'm jumping to the end. Get out. It's just not worth it. Right. And sometimes you can't control those things. Sometimes it's a question of revenues. Sometimes it's, downsizing and all of that. That's the way it goes. But in my case, it was this way of working was valued. And so to come back to your question, and I'm going off on a tangent because I can't give you a specific answer about why I am the way I am, other than as life changes, you start having other things start happening too. So you go from being a single guy making decisions for yourself to being a guy in a couple that you really you value, and to all of a sudden being married. And this is married, having kids, your obligations and your expectations are changing. And so what you need and what you expect from roles and what's expected of you also changes, and what you value also changes. And that also then informs, am I going like this, or am I just going to climb a ladder? And yeah, so it's a complex question, Mark, and I'm sorry that I'm going off on it, but I can't give you a straight answer.
I think that might frustrate some of the viewers who are looking for a quick answer, but I doubt it. No, I'm trying to find the secret sauce, but there really isn't one. You came back to Montreal. You had worked in a certain opportunity while trying to build your life with who would eventually become your wife. And now you have 3 kids. I really want to get also to what you're doing now, but there are events before that, right? That led to where you are now. Can you kind of go through that a little bit?
So the organization in Montreal was great, and the people, it was called the International Center for Human Rights and Democratic Development. It was a federal agency, basically, that had been established under the Mulroney government in 89, opened its doors in Montreal in 91. It explicitly or purposefully in Montreal to be far away from Ottawa and far away from official Ottawa, I guess. And they had federal funding to support human rights and democratic development in line with the International Declaration on Human Rights. All right. So to support organizations and countries around the world working and fighting for human rights, whether it's women's rights, whether it's indigenous rights, whether it's the right to food, housing. So it was fascinating, and the colleagues who I met there and who I worked with there were people like with a deep sense of purpose and devotion to the cause. And it was still very close. Like my background, having worked on a parliamentary program in Serbia and Montenegro, and having worked in politics, is what I think they were trying to bring in, like a little bit of a different perspective. And it's where I was in an organization with a proper organization. Like there was like a human resources director and a director of finance and a director of programs, a proper, more or less NGO or nonprofit type organization, but as a federal agency, which meant for the first time I was in an institution and that I could learn and see how it works and how it functioned, in addition to managing teams in Canada and abroad. And somehow I was what you described earlier, that corporate ladder. I don't know if I was describing climbing a corporate ladder, but I was gaining responsibilities. And it was like reporting to a board of directors, engaging with the board of directors, all the stuff that you would see in most nonprofits. It wasn't a nonprofit, but let's just say the management of it was a little bit more like a nonprofit. And the organization went through a significant crisis in 2009 and 2010. There were disagreements around the board table about how things should be managed. I found myself in a key position with some others at that time during this crisis, and so thrown into a situation which was not easy. but where there were more responsibilities that I had, and I was being asked, there were expectations from colleagues and staff, not just for myself, but amongst all of us to try and react and respond. A new president came in 2010. And one of the things, again, we're coming back to what I knew. In this case, there was a more deliberate distinction of what I wanted to do and not what I didn't want to do. What I knew is what I wanted to do is I wanted to be in a role that was closer to the private sector, not necessarily in the private sector, but closer to the idea of how do I raise money? Because this was a government agency, and so how do you raise money is that you think about going back to the government to see how you increase your budget, how do you speak to different ministries, how do you, how do you convince Parliament, because the center had been created by an act of Parliament. And so but I wanted something a little bit more broad. In the meantime, we had our first child, our daughter. My wife was expecting our second child. This crisis at the organization didn't lead me to necessarily want to stay. And I knew I wanted a role that was closer to raising money and closer to the private sector. And then here's a case where, like I said, I described earlier how different times of your life you make certain decisions, right, based on where you are in your life and what obligations you have. And at that moment, in 2010, we had two opportunities. I had received an offer to work abroad, to manage an office for a nonprofit organization. And my wife, despite being pregnant at the time, and she had gone through a process for 2 years, because that's what it takes to get into government sometimes, had received an indeterminate offer from the federal government. And so we decided to move to the Ottawa area. I kind of made the decision that I didn't want to continue working. Again, I didn't want to work in this sector. The NGO worked on supporting democracy, like working with free media, working with nonprofits abroad, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted something that was more focused on I want to focus on raising money, engaging with the private sector. So we took so despite thinking that I was going to go back abroad, and she and I had worked abroad and we thought we were going to do, and I was like, no, we're going to go to Ottawa. This is an indeterminate position. You're being offered this despite being pregnant, and this will be good for our family. And so we left Montreal and we moved to the Ottawa area in 2010, 2011. So again, that was a clear moment of this is what I think I want to do. What I don't want to do, I turned down that one, and this is good for the family in that instance. And then I was able to land a job working with the cooperative sector in Canada. So cooperatives are a type of business. It was still working on international projects, but it was much closer to, and I was responsible for raising money for those projects and engaging with cooperatives from, mainly across English Canada, but also French Canada.
Yeah. Okay. So you moved to Ottawa. I guess there was a second one on the way when that happened, that decision, and eventually I guess a third one came. What happened after, I guess that was the Canadian Cooperative Association, right? So you went on to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities?
Yeah, wonderful organization, both of them. CCA transitioned into a new type of organization, the Canadian Cooperative Association, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is also an incredible organization. In both those cases, because of the experience I had at the center in Montreal, but these are all now institutional things, right? So you see how, and these are nonprofits, these aren't companies, but you can see how they function, like how they're established under law, what their obligations are, how they understand risk, how they manage their finances, how they engage with their boards of directors, like all of these pieces. And so in my head, I was going to a place where I'm growing in these institutions, I'm gaining knowledge about these institutions, I can raise money for these institutions. I thought I was a purely institutional person. So this is getting closer to what you described earlier. You're climbing a corporate ladder. So my corporate ladder wasn't in the same corporation, The corporate ladder was more of a zigzag thing between different institutions, with gaining more responsibility, gaining more responsibility in terms of like the size of portfolios or raising more money. And so I thought that I was heading towards a position that would be in a senior role, or like I thought my head was, I'm an institutional person. I'm learning how these institutions function, these types of institutions, I should say, and this is where I'm going. And all the way through, to come back to where the conversation started, it's about the how. It's like, how are you interacting with people in every single one of those? How are you trying to maintaining a certain level of performance and expectation and being able to do that? But then it's also just that how. And that's something that's kind of in all of these places. And I think of like the amazing people that I'm still in touch with, going back to whether I worked in politics or whether I worked in Serbia or whether I worked in Montreal or with the cooperative sector or with the municipal sector. Like, incredible people out there. Like it's inspiring to be able to engage with people like this, and in all times you're able to try and do things and build things that affect their lives or affect them as individuals. So I went from the cooperative sector then into the municipal sector, and I was there until the year into the pandemic, right, into the 2021.
So you built yourself into an institution guy, right? And that's as you profess for yourself. But you're not doing that now, right?
No.
What are you doing now? How'd you get there too?
Now we're coming to the crux of the conversation, right? Like, how do we go from how does this path that isn't linear necessarily lead to the place where you are? And it's, if you had told me what year are we? We're 2025. So if you had told me just as the pandemic is starting, we all kind of remember the day when the doors closed, and when we all were sent home, and we remember where we were, and we remember those last conversations that we had. If you had told me then, or in the year prior to that in 5 years, Michael, you're going to be co-owner of your own business, I would have told you that you're crazy. What are you talking about? My future is not like taking on that kind of risk. Taking on that kind of risk from a family perspective. Like how am I going to be able to do that? Right? We have a bloody mortgage, for Pete's sake. We have kids who are in activities. We have all of that stuff, right? I'm not going to start my own business. You got to be kidding me. So let's say that's if that had been January of 2020. If you had told me that, I would have told you impossible. Let's fast forward to January of 2021 or February of 2021, a year and a month later. My time at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities was coming to an end. Like, this was during the pandemic still, right? We'd come out of one lockdown. The kids are back at school in masks. January 2021, my time at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities comes to an end. And I remember thinking to myself, and again, this is privilege. We come back to the idea of privilege. My wife is she's still she's a public servant, right? Which means that she has all the advantages that come with being a public servant. My time at FCM ended, but I was okay for a little while. I was in no stress. Unlike others in similar situations during the pandemic, it wasn't happening to us. And so I had the time to think, okay, now for the first time in my life, maybe, to say, like, pause. So what is important? And I remember that I took out a notebook. I might have it here somewhere. I do. I took out a notebook like this, and I wrote, it's this first one. Look, I can even show it to you. Look, 24th of March, 2021. And it says, look at the top line. You can't read my writing. It says, so what now? That's March of 2021. And the first thing is that I put in the box up here is help myself and be good to myself. So I was thinking about me in that moment. It's like, this is like, I'm out of a job. So what do I have to do? Right. And then the how that follows is, wow, love my family, love my friends, be grateful, be positive, be optimistic, be deliberate. Why? Because this will get me to a place, and I'm reading it, and I didn't expect this. I didn't think this was in the drawer next to me, but it is. Because this will help me get to a place where I can help others thrive, and that I can thrive. And then what is important in doing that, and this is what follows, it's all in the how and in the who. So how am I going to, so I wasn't thinking about a job. I wasn't thinking about a sector. But I was thinking about how am I going to be asked to, whatever the title is of a position or what I'm going to be asked to do, how am I want to make sure that I can control or I have a say or be the one who decides how I'm going to do it. Number one. Number two, who am I going to do it with? Like, I'd like to be able to be in a position where I can decide or have a say on who I'm going to do it with. So the how and the who, the what wasn't even like in the front of my mind. So to help others, to help be good to myself and to help other people thrive, I need to really focus on the how, and now I had added the who to it. And so in the meantime, that kind of informed the types of job, and I was getting interviews. Over the course of the next year, I managed to get interviews for different types of positions for organizations in Canada, in different roles, organizations in the United States as well. And in the meantime, I had somehow started consulting. One thing I've learned over the course of my career is how to write proposals, and how to win proposals. And someone sent me one not too long after that journal entry in March of 2021, and I won a bid. And like this was when the second lockdown started, I think, in the spring of 2021. And I remember we disappeared. Again, privilege. We were like we rented a house on on a lake, because we just didn't want to be isolated in our home, and it wasn't. I don't think it was very expensive. It was just very far, and we disappeared for 7 or 8 weeks. The kids were learning from home, and I was working on this contract. And in the meantime, other people were calling and saying, "Hey, we understand that you're consulting." And I'd work on a second contract, and then a third one, and in the meantime, one of the people who really affected me when I was at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and for whom I had enormous respect, also had moved on from that role. And I brought him to work on some contracts with me. Like, it's way more fun to work with people we enjoy. Again, we come back to the who. And one thing led to another, and he looked at me one day and he goes, why don't we just do this together? What is this? And he was applying for jobs too. And he's like, why don't we just, what is this? Come on. And eventually in the fall of 2021, or it was almost winter of 2021 or January, I was like, okay, let's do this. It took me a while to realize, yeah, I can become a co-owner of a business, and we can start this consulting firm. And when I said yes, he was like, finally, it took you long enough to figure it out. And we launched the company in June. We signed all the forms in June of 2022. And it's really surreal because we come back to, we've all go through tragedy and very difficult moments. Like the spring of 2022 was really hard for our family. And nevertheless, out of that, not because of it, but there's all these things that then happened in that summer and the launching of the company. And here we are 3.5 years later, company's still going. We are basically a consulting firm. He and I are the two partners in it. We work with people that we've known sometimes for 20 plus years. There are people who are working with us, not as other consultants, that I worked with when I worked in politics, that I worked with when I was in Montreal, that I worked with when I was in the co-op sector, that I worked with when I was with the municipal sector, new people that we've met. It's incredible how this kind of has come together 25 years later. some of the people I knew from back then are like, we're still, again, the how we worked together or how we engaged 25 years ago directly affects the who today, and hopefully the success of the business. Now, if 3.5 years in, will it be here in a year or 2 years? I hope so, but I can't predict it. Will something else come afterwards? Entirely possible. I think if there's data that shows that most small businesses close after a certain amount of time or whatever. But am I having a lot of fun? Am I able to work with people I really enjoy? Am I able to work in a way that kind of reflects where this conversation started? Trying to be there for others? Oh, definitely.
Like I'm going to go off on a tangent too, actually, because I find myself after an hour of this conversation, there's a point where I just came to realize, because you're not the first one that I've been trying to do an episode with for season 3, which is coming out next year. I don't know, man. It's just the timing, whether it's faith or universe or God or something, but like something in what you're saying resonates with me a lot. When you pulled out that journal, something relevant at this time for me, and it's almost like you said, be good to yourself, right? You said that, and self-care is not self-indulgence, but I fell into that trap. Like I would always try to take it to the other extreme, where like meant for others, like really for others, and you forget yourself. And this year I really learned that lesson, and I'm still trying to figure my way how to incorporate more self-care and more like be good to yourself. And it's good to see someone who had gone through it a little bit earlier than me, and I can learn from him. And that's certainly like a privilege for me doing this podcast. So my gratitude to you for sharing that part of what happened to you in your life.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I yeah, we never know. Just it's not, to be good to yourself is really hard, right? To be good to yourself, and especially, like, again, this would be another tangent, and you could do a whole episode or series about like men in their late 40s and early 50s who go through a whole bunch of other stuff, and how they're not good to themselves, and that leads down a whole bunch of other like very negative things. And so we almost have to be doubly or triply or quadruply intentional in trying to be good to ourselves and to others, because otherwise we can do really bad things. And so I'm saying that because I'm really conscious that I forget this a lot. And so to hear you say it, and to hear you bring it back to that, it's like, okay, good. I gotta stay with it. I can't let it go, because I might get off this call. In fact, I'm certain I'm going to get off this call and probably, be frustrated with one or at least two of my kids, at least, yeah, about different things. And then I'll be frustrated with like, oh crap, I got to start making dinner because tonight I got this, and then I got this that's coming, and I'm just like, I'll lose sight of this. And so even this type of conversation, and I don't think I appreciated it enough about the podcast that you have, but having listened to a number of the previous episodes and how people are talking, and it's amazing that how much can resonate of people's different experiences in any type of industry that they're in, right? And so thank you for saying that the experience that I've shared has had that has resonated with you.
It's exactly what the podcast is made for, definitely. And I'm privileged in that it gives me an excuse to reconnect with people.
We're privileged that you reach out to us. We're privileged, Mark, that like, yeah, of course. Think about it, like this, coming back to like people that I'm working with now that I worked with, 25 years ago. Jeez, I've got a guy who I went to school with 30 years ago who reached out to say, hey, listen, do you want to talk? You want to talk about yourself and your life and your career? Sure.
That's so funny.
Like
Absolutely.
it's
When you were talking about like what was it that Cynthia saw in you, and then you went back and it's like some things about how you carry yourself. It brought me back to, and this is going to go way back, to our speech class in Loyola. With Dr.
Dr.
Khoury.
Khoury.
Bounce, project your voice, bounce it off the wall like ping pong balls.
Oh my God, I think about that class all the time.
It's so good. Oh my God.
And I remember in that class, and sorry to all your viewers, this will probably get edited out, or maybe not. I remember in the first speech, and this would have been grade 9, Sec 3, and Dr. Khoury, I went up and I had practiced my speech, and I was ready. I was gonna, slowly, silently, now the moon walks the night in her silver shoe, and this way and that she peers and sees silver fruit upon silver trees, or whatever. There was some poem that I had to memorize. But I went up in the class and I stood there and I was holding, I was holding my arm behind my back, like this, like nervous. And I remember he stopped me after the first 3 syllables, like yelling, like he was just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you holding up? You can't stand up straight. You can't hold your head up. And I'm like, holy crap. Jeez, what is this?
Yeah,
And then,
he scared the
and
shit
then
out of me, that's for sure.
I restarted and I did it again. And I got a good grade on that poem that I had memorized, and then I had to recite, which to this day, no, Sec 3 would have been 1992, right? So to this day, 34 years later, I still remember the first stanza of that poem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think and it's one of those things where like you don't realize, but that's part of what contributes. It's a small part, but you carry that with you, and then that's part of the piece that builds the experience that other people have of you. Because you carry yourself that way. I remember not believing ever that I was a good speaker, and then the first time I went in front of an entire, I guess, room of people to convince them on a subject that I had known very little about prior to that meeting. And I had just given whatever presentation I had given, and they came to me and they said, you speak fairly well. I don't understand why you're so hard on yourself for not being able to be in front of people. You speak better than pretty much most of the people that I know. And this is in a previous company that I was in, and you don't realize what kind of privilege you have until someone points it out to you, and then you're like, oh, okay, wow. And in that moment, I felt, wow, I felt gratitude for being in Dr. Khoury's class, because prior to that, I felt he just tortured kids in front having them in front of them,
You
making
did
fun of
torture
them.
kids.
So so it's what a gift it is to be able to share this with you. I know, you know what, listen, I know we kind of went off on a tangent there, but and I definitely won't edit that out in the from the final projects
I wonder if
episode.
there's any Loyola guys or girls now, but no, the girls are good. They're still in. They're just the first years, but the Loyola guys are listening to would listen to this. The folks we went to high school with. Anyhow, that was a long time ago. But those were, we were privileged to go to that kind of school. It was like semi-private, right? And so our parents invested. Like, they made a decision, because neither you nor I comes from a place where this was easy for our parents, right? It's great that 30 plus years later, we can connect to talk like we are.
Yeah, and to bring it full circle from where we were in the beginning to now, it's Mike, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and I can really see that we still share that common value of men for others. To hear your incredible career and to it's kind of a relief to realize that there is some intention in it, but there isn't some intention in it. Like it kind of happened, but also, there was some method to it.
There was there were moments where there are moments where you make decisions. I mean, we're a collection of our experiences, and those experiences lead us to make certain decisions or to feel certain things. I think that's probably one definition of intuition, right? And so to have the faith in that intuition that those experiences are leading you to make what are hopefully good decisions for yourself. And so, like, I had the opportunity in March of 2021 because of the situation we were in. The pandemic was horrible. Like, it was terrible for so many. And to think that I could sit there and write those words and feel okay about it because, I had my wife is a federal public servant, and because I wasn't like summarily let go with nothing to speak for. No, it was a departure, and yeah. So I just even the ability to do that and to tell myself to be good to myself, even having that opportunity. Like there's so many other stories you can hear about people who did not have that opportunity, and within 3 weeks of their job ending because of the pandemic had to find a way to make things go and had to find a way, and they had obligations as well, huge obligations. And so all the more important to actually be grateful, to actually be very deliberate in how you do things, and to try and be positive. Yeah.
If I don't know if this counts, but one tradition we have on this podcast is, given all the experiences that you've shared, is there any overarching advice you'd like to offer the audience?
I think the only thing that I can think of, and again, this has been I hope this has come through as a thread throughout this conversation, is that the how really matters. So how you're being and how you are with others really matters. And that's going to carry all the way through everything that you do. Like, I was just listening to and the how isn't always I'm just going to be friendly and I'm going to be like, and the how is different in every culture too, in every part of the world that you're in, and how people are expecting you to be, and being aware that the expectations you have and the how is going to change if you're in one country or another country, or in one village or another village, in one family or another family, and just to be aware of that. And so, but that how, whatever that how is, really, really matters. And make sure that it's a reflection of who you are too. Like, don't start doing that how just for others or on the basis of what others are expecting. It really has to be rooted in. I think to an interview that I just listened to that you gave, she had her own small business that she started in placement, executive search or something like that.
Samantha Bateman.
Samantha, yes. And how Samantha, she wanted this contract, and she called back the Pepsi bottling company or whatever it was 3 times. The person who she had submitted it to once, twice, and the third time she called, and the how here matters. It comes right to it. And the message she left, and this was what would have been at a time when people check their messages, right? I don't know if that anyone checks messages anymore. The message she left was, hey, listen, do you make a habit of not calling a woman back after 3 messages?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, good on you. But she, like, something in her how, and that message led for her to have a breakfast meeting the next day with this guy, which 6 months later turned into a contract which paid their bills for the next 3 years. But it was just that how, and how she was, and an awareness that she needed to do something that really matters. So that story, and I just listened to it before we started chatting. It really resonated with me because, like, wow, good on you. That makes a difference.
She was an incredible guest. Very testament to not always taking the easy path, but carrying herself with her values, if someone hears or watches this episode and is very compelled by your story, how do they get in touch with you?
I think if you would just go on LinkedIn and you put in my name, there's two of us in the world, I think. One of them is a distant cousin, the other one. But he lives and works in Poland. And so I'm the other guy. I'm the guy who's based in Canada.
That is the most Mike Wodzicki answer you can get.
Why? What do you mean? I'm not going to put up I'm not going to, I don't even have business cards, I don't think, but you'll find it on LinkedIn. And if that doesn't work, just call Mark. Just reach out to the podcast and Mark will put you in touch with me.
100% will do. Yeah, there's some things that we do. We put maybe the LinkedIn profile or URL in the description and the comments as well. For sure, I would be happy to connect with anyone who would be interested in connecting with you.
And it's the way the world works, right? The world works and this is something I think you were describing how it's like this podcast is that you engage with people and with stories and experiences that you never thought possible otherwise. But it's the way the world works, right? You can never predict, like Samantha and that conversation and that breakfast she had, which did not lead to a contract right away, but 6 months later did, right? And so who knows where this podcast leads to.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate your time.
This is a lot of fun, and I hope I was able to answer your questions. I hope this made sense. But it's a lot of fun. Thank you.
With that in mind, I would like to say to the audience, thank you. If you've gotten this far in the podcast, I thank you very much. And I hope to see you on the next one.
Take care. And for listening to stories about our high school life 30 years ago.
Which are still very relevant today.
Very relevant.
Hey, thank you very much for making it this far into the podcast. I really appreciate it. And you know what? We're not new anymore. We've got a couple of seasons under our belt. But I do want to say that we still need your help in trying to grow the audience. So if you can, please comment, please like, please subscribe to whichever platform you are watching this video in. So thank you. Have a good one.